Good morning, viewers and listeners out there. It's another series in our British Business Podcast. Today we're in the Steam House at Birmingham, and I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Matt Shaw from Forresters.
Morning.
Welcome, and can't wait to get into the detail of what it is that you guys do. So can you tell us, first of all, what it is that Forresters is and what they do, and also what it is that you do?
Yeah, so Forresters is, everyone says we're a firm of solicitors, and we're not. We're a firm of patent and trademark attorneys,
Okay.
Which is similar but not quite the same. It's a niche area of the law. It's all to do with IP, intellectual property. So we specialise in that, and that's all that we do. So we're not a general law firm. We don't do corporate commercial. We don't do employment. We just do IP. And IP, in very simple terms, is three things: patents, trademarks, and designs. I think you had my colleague Andy Harding a couple of weeks ago, whenever that was, talking about patents. Patents are all about inventions. Trademarks are all, in very simple terms, are all about trade names, logos, trading styles, and then designs are the shape of things like this microphone stand or your watch, or that, visual and aesthetic sorts of things. So that's what we specialise in. We've been going for about 140 years. We started in 1884. We started here in Birmingham, actually, so it's nice to be here and doing this. This was the city of manufacturing, of industry, and a lot of our clients still operate in the manufacturing sectors.
Are you from Birmingham?
No, I'm an adopted Brummie.
Okay.
So I moved here in 94 for the job, shortly after university. That was the best part of, 28 years ago.
Was it Birmingham University?
No, I was in Nottingham.
Okay.
Did chemistry at Nottingham. But moved here, like I say, to start as a trainee in 94. That was a long time ago. I haven't managed to leave yet, so there we are. So I'm kind of stuck here. And yeah, my role there, well, I'm the managing partner now. I've been there for, had that role for a couple of years almost. I've been a partner since 2002. I qualified first as a patent attorney, so inventions, all the technical side, and then moved about 7 or 8 years ago, I suppose, more into the trademark side. Various reasons for that. One of the partners who specialised in that retired, and she had a portfolio to hand over, so I kind of picked up quite a bit of that work. And it kind of suited me. I quite like the commercial aspect of trademarks. It's the stuff that you see on shop shelves, you see on advertising hoardings, that sort of thing. It's the real life kind of cutting edge. This is how products are sold, and this is how you distinguish yours from somebody else's. But it's a pretty wide ranging role. I suppose the trademark side is my sort of day-to-day money-earning bit. The partner and the managing partner side of it is more admin-y. Not too bad, I'm pleased to say. I quite enjoy it. I'm sort of the face of the firm, I suppose. That's part of the thing. Interactions with institutes, press releases, that sort of stuff. And it gives me a chance to get out and about, which I quite like as well.
Where is it based?
We're based in central Birmingham,
Okay.
But we've got an office in London as well, in the Gherkin, very smart. Also in Liverpool and in Munich.
Wow.
Munich, Andy might have told you last time round, is where the European Patent Office is based.
Right.
So we've had an office there since 1978 when the EPO was set up. Nice part of the world to go and visit. So four key outposts, but Birmingham's where it started. We call Birmingham HQ. Our London colleagues think differently, but that's the way it goes.
How did you get into it? What was that all about?
Like lots of people, almost by accident. I graduated in chemistry, like I said, in about 92, I think it would have been. I didn't really want to be a chemist. I sort of fell into a job working for Pizza Express, believe it or not, as a management trainee. I did that for about 6-9 months, something like that, and I quite enjoyed it. It was pretty character forming,
What was that role? What did you do there?
Well, I was a trainee assistant manager. I didn't know a huge amount about catering. I still don't really, but I kind of managed to get hold of that role, and I enjoyed it. You learnt a lot.
Customer facing?
Yeah, very much. Yeah. But also the training scheme at the time was pretty good, actually. I probably changed now, but in order to have a managerial role, you had to know how the various roles were done. The other roles, so cooking, cleaning, working the bar, accounts, stock, all that kind of stuff. Even to the point of driving around London on a lorry, picking up the frozen dough and dropping it off. So it was a pretty wide-ranging training experience. But I realised after a while it wasn't going to be for me. It wasn't a long-term thing. But I enjoyed it. It was good to do.
A lot of our listeners and viewers out there are people who are aspiring to become an entrepreneur, to be a business person, even maybe to a next job. So actually what you're saying, I think, is those 2 years were pretty good in terms of giving you an insight into business.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, I think that's fair to say. They were also a pretty good insight into hard work. You know, helping to run a restaurant is tough, especially now. You know, finishing late 5-6 days a week, it's not an easy job. But I enjoyed it. You meet lots of people. Ostensibly managing people when you are 22, no, less than that, whenever I was 21, 22. Having little experience in the sector is not easy. And the staff make it pretty clear that it's not easy. So it wasn't the easiest. It wasn't the easiest kind of what's the word, sort of entrance into that sort of world. But it was good. I enjoyed it. I learned quite a lot. But like I say, it turned out that that wasn't really for me. Sure. So I went to the career service in Oxford because there was a sort of like a sort of sharing arrangement effectively between Nottingham and Oxford in those days, and ran through a computer program. It was called Cascade at the time, all those years ago, and it spat out. It sort of asked you various questions about what you like and what you're good at and all that sort of thing. And it spat out Patent Attorney, which I hadn't heard of before. I thought, oh, that's quite interesting. So I wrote off 40 letters. In those days, it was an actual letter that you posted because email didn't exist. And I got one interview and one job, and that was this one. So here we are. You know, that's kind of how it all turned out. And I didn't really know what to expect. No one really does when you come into this profession. It's quite an unusual and quite specialised profession. But it turned out that I quite liked it, and I was reasonably good at it. So I qualified as a patent attorney, I don't know, 4 or 5 years after that, something like that. I was a partner in 2002. I think I was the youngest ever at the time. I've been pipped to the post since then, irritatingly. But anyway, at the time, it was not a bad accolade. Yeah, that was the best part of 20 years ago. So I haven't really looked back since. And it's an interesting role. It's an interesting job. It's quite a niche. I keep using that word, but it's quite a small profession. I think there's only, I don't know, 3, 4, 5,000 patent attorneys in the country, something like that. So there's a few more trademark attorneys, which is more of the role that I now do. But if you compare that to solicitors, for example, where there must be, I don't know, several 100,000, I don't know how many, but it's a much bigger profession. So we're a small bunch. And
in terms of the workload for those 5,000, is there enough? Is there too much? Is there not enough?
I suppose we'd always say there's not enough. We're all pretty busy. There aren't many patent and trademark attorneys who are knocking around not doing very much. Okay. You know, IP is being. We'll talk about that in a minute, but it's just being generated all the time. So yeah, I mean we're busy. Colleagues in other firms I know are busy. There's a lot of innovation going on, especially around here, especially in this building. Come to think of it. Yeah. So yeah, we're not we're not sort of scrabbling around at the moment. So yeah, I think it's probably about right. The number of people in the profession for the amount of work that comes out in the UK seems to be coped with pretty well. It's quite without wishing to sort of blow our own trumpets too much, it's quite a specialised area that we work in. And I always say to people, if you want to work in IP, there are 3 things that you need to be interested in, and you'd hope reasonably good at, which is science, language, and law. You need the science background. We all have science backgrounds as patent attorneys. Because you need to understand what the invention is all about. Okay. You need to understand how a gearbox works or how a chemical process operates, all that kind of stuff. You need that basic background. You need to know about the law, or enough about the law in our particular field. So you've got to have an interest in that. And lastly, you need language. You need language skills, because the sort of stuff that we are dealing with, whether that's patents or trademarks or designs, can be quite complicated. And you're quite often liaising with people who are experts in that field. They might be researchers, they might be professors, they might be university spin-outs, whatever they might be. They will know a lot more about their topic than I do. Sure. But in order to explain that either to your colleagues or to other clients, you've got to be able to distill that pretty complex stuff into relatively plain language. That's one of the things that we try to do in our firm is to provide advice in clear language. And you might think that's obvious, but it's not.
No, sure.
And it's a skill that takes some time to pick up. So it's, if you've got a bit of an aptitude and an interest in those three things, IP is absolutely bang on. It's a very interesting thing. It's quite challenging from the technical side. I like it from the linguistic side. You have to put stuff into language that people understand, and I like the legal aspect of it too. You've got to work out, whether you're on the right side of the fence or not. Sometimes when you get into contentious stuff, you've got to work out the best way of sorting out problems. Not every problem has the same solution. It depends on all sorts of things. It depends on who the parties are, the relative size, the relative financial clouts, the personal interactions, why the dispute arose, what's at stake, all these sorts of things, which obviously come along with a few years' experience. But it's never boring. Put it that way. It has its moments, but it's never boring.
You come across in the role that you do, and the role is twofold, and you may tell me it's more, because you're actually managing people, business, all of that, but you're also bringing in the money as well. So you're in the sales environment. Yeah,
that's right. I always say to the trainees, all of our colleagues actually, that we're not just patent or trademark attorneys or lawyers or whatever. We're also business advisors. We're trying to help people with sometimes some fairly complicated problems. But we're also salespeople. At the end of the day, if no money comes into the firm, that's the end of that. So we pack up and go home. So another skill that takes some practice, but generally speaking, we're all pretty good at it, is you need to attract in new work, and you need to be able to get out and meet people and get on with them, you hope, and build the client base. So that's kind of right. There is a sales aspect to that. The management side of it, all the partners frankly take their fair share.
Okay.
I don't, despite the title, I don't really have a huge amount more to do on the management side than they do. There are certain roles that I do which I quite enjoy. I don't mind doing that at all. But in terms of how we operate, we're a fairly level playing field. We all have the same vote, so I have no more say than anybody else. But it's that can be a challenge at times. We're all quite bright people, pretty forthright at times, and getting things decided is not always easy. But generally speaking, we get there in the end.
I remember speaking to you the last time we met, and one of the things you told me, which was hugely important to you, but also gave you an immense amount back, and that was communicating with your team, wherever they were, whatever they did. But you said that being able to be the person that can communicate and bring people together, or thank them for doing a job well done, you said that was an immensely sort of proud part of your work.
Do you know what? It's a thing that I personally try pretty hard to do. We don't always get it right. No one does when you're running a team.
There's no formula, is there?
And you're not trained to do that.
Sure.
We're not professional business managers by any stretch.
No.
We've sort of fallen into that role. But I do, and I hope that anyone that works with me seeing this will that this will resonate a bit. I do make a point. I try to be fair to people. I think all the partners do, actually. I think we're quite good at that. Like I say, we get it wrong sometimes.
Sure.
What we will do at that stage is we'll generally put our hands up and say, we didn't quite get that right.
Sure.
But it's important to do that. In fact, it's
we're all human, aren't we?
Well, precisely. It's a lesson I learned actually when I was working for the restaurant chain back in the early 90s. Is that if you get something wrong, the first thing to do is to accept the fact you got something wrong, and the second thing to do is to go all out to sort the problem out. To use an example from the restaurant trade, someone complains about the food or the restaurant's cold or whatever it might be. You could just say, well, do you know what? We're short-staffed.
Yep.
Sorry.
Yeah.
We'll try better next time. You know what? The customer goes away thinking they didn't really address that terribly well. If you say, do you know what? We're short-staffed. That was entirely our fault. We messed that up, and I'm sorry that we ruined your evening, but this is on us. Come back next time. Wow. That's on us as well. The customer goes away thinking, you know what? They did cock it up a bit, but actually the way they dealt with it was brilliant, and they go away with a positive view of the thing, right?
Yeah.
So, and it's the same in any business, including in ours. We don't make, touch wood, we don't make that many mistakes. Sometimes things slip through the net, and you annoy a client or whatever reason, that you can't stop that happening on occasion. But the thing to do is just recognise the fact that you've done that, deal with it, and hopefully you can rectify the situation.
You may have said this earlier, and I didn't get it. So, how many staff do you have?
Across the board, about 140
Okay.
across the 4 offices. We're about 40 or so in Birmingham, about the same in London. Liverpool's about, I don't know, 25 or so, and the rest are in Munich. So it's in the grand scheme of things, we're not enormous.
Sure.
But in relation to what we do, we're one of the bigger firms.
Okay.
I've never really sort of done the maths, but we're probably in the top third, I would think, of UK firms. So we're at that point where we're a decent size and we can cope with pretty much whatever anyone throws at us.
Sure.
But we're not so enormous that we lose track of sort of who we are, and I know most of the staff by name. Please work fairly hard on that. It's a bit embarrassing if you go to a company way down, you don't recognise people. But anyway, so we're at that sort of slightly large, middle-sized firm, I suppose. But it works quite well at that sort of size. If you get too much bigger than that, at the moment we are 16, 17 partners. If you get much bigger than that, it becomes quite hard to sit around a table physically.
Sure.
You need a big table, like Putin's table. If you're much smaller than that, then there are certain things that you might not be able to cope with because you haven't got the resource. But I think we're comfortable pretty much about where we are.
And getting around, do you consciously make an effort to
the
visit?
other offices? Yeah, I do actually. Yeah. And I can look you and the camera in whichever one is in the eye and say, yeah, I do. I do make a point of that, and I think it's important. And I think, I encourage a lot of the more senior staff to do the same, and they do actually for the most part. We are one firm. We're in 4 different places, but fundamentally we're all doing the same thing. And the end game is, or the end goal rather, is the same for all of us. And I think that is important. I think it's also a lot easier to deal with issues if you know people, if you know them quite well.
Yeah.
We're not all best of friends. Of course you're not. If there's 140 of us, that's never going to be the case. But if you can be, cordial, social, you can chat to them about various bits and bobs, that does help. So I spend a bit of time in London. I mean, it's a fantastic new office in the Gherkin, so who wouldn't? Liverpool's a lovely place, overlooks the river, fantastic. Munich is just a beautiful city. So, any excuse to get out there,
Sounds like you're blessed.
I'll take it. Yeah, exactly, yeah.
So what I'd like to talk about is the 2 areas, staff and the business, what you do. In terms of the pandemic, how did it affect you?
That's a very good question. So I think when the pandemic first hit, we thought it was going to be a disaster. I mean, I think lots of people thought that.
I think they did. Yeah.
We thought it was going to be over a cliff and we'd be in real trouble. And we thought that because people were tightening their belts and everyone was scared. I mean, scared about the disease, but scared about just, the world just stopping.
Sure.
And we thought, what? Is IP and R&D really going to be people's, top of their list? And we thought, no, they're going to want to keep the heating on and pay the staff and, keep the thing afloat. And to my utter astonishment, and I still don't know how this was the case, in the first year of the pandemic, we had a record year of all time.
Wow.
All time. So not just top line, but bottom line as well. Now, clearly we weren't spending as much traveling around the world.
Sure.
But that wasn't the main reason. The top line was better as well. So whether people were, I don't know, more efficient at home or had a bit more time on their hands, I don't know. And I still don't really understand how that happened. But oddly enough, I'm not alone. I've spoken to other professional firms and they've said the same thing. So something happened. So in pure sort of, pounds and pence, it didn't affect us anywhere near as we thought it was. We thought it was going to. It clearly affected how the firm operates, and that legacy is still with us now, like every other professional firm, and
Sure.
like most businesses across the world, probably, with work from home and flexible working, all that kind of stuff. My personal view, and my partners listening to this they'll nod, is that I think that the work from home probably went a little bit far. I think it probably went slightly the wrong side of the line. I'd like to have people in the office a bit more. I appreciate that flexibility is an important thing, and I recognise the fact that it has changed, and we can't have people in the office 5 days a week if they don't want to. That's just the way it is, and you live with it. But I do worry slightly about, I think, how business in general is gonna fare. It's a very complicated thing, Michael, and I'm sure it's the same in yours. You know, you can look at efficiency in all sorts of different ways. You can look at efficiency in terms of, you know, am I interrupted less doing the job at home? Yes, you probably are, unless you've got kids and cats and dogs and all the rest of it.
Yes.
So for a given task, you're probably better off doing that in a quiet environment, and I get that entirely, and I've done it myself once or twice. But the job that we do and the job that other professions do is not just about the work. Is everything else, right? It's about the interaction. It's about the training. It's about this kind of thing. It's about the getting out and about. You know, I wouldn't be here if I hadn't met Lawrence. I think it was a Moseley Rugby a few months ago.
That's right.
So those sorts of things are important, and they're important to build a business, and we need to not lose sight of that. You know, people do need to interact, and these little sort of, you know, you might call them water cooler chats or whatever they are, they do generate things, and it's a lot more difficult to do that with a scheduled phone call or a Zoom call or whatever it might be than just to pop your head around the door and say, you know, what do you think about this? So I don't want to lose that. And I'm not alone in that. It's not just me, and it's not just my firm. Lots of firms say the same thing.
I've just read a book actually called Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss, the terrorist hostage negotiator for the FBI. And he said that in business, in meetings, in negotiations, you have 5, 38, 55. Sorry, 7, 38, 55.
Yeah.
Edit that. And basically says that what you're talking about is the 7. The 38 is the tone of voice.
Yep.
And the 55 is the body language.
Yep.
Those two.
Yeah.
So just what you're talking about, it's not important. You go on a Zoom call, it's not important, or it becomes more important because you can't see tone.
I think you're right. I find that, you know, the sort of Zoom calls, funny enough, I think that Zoom calls are actually, Zoom, Teams, whichever platform you want to use, I think they're actually worse than phone calls if there's two of you, because there's always that bloody, you know, irritating lag, and the thing will cut out at some point or freeze and whatever. And you don't need, with a decent phone line, you can talk like this.
Yes.
It's that quick. You can't do that on a video call. And I find that video calls with clients or with colleagues tend to be rather sort of functional, as in, we've got this to talk about, you talk about it, and that's it.
Yes.
And that's fine for some things, because you just want to bash something out and move on. If you're trying to build a relationship with somebody, whether that's someone that you've met in real life or on LinkedIn or whatever, that's quite hard to do.
Very.
Unless you can do it in real life and have a coffee or a beer or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So I think it's important for people to not forget that most good client relationships that I've got, that my colleagues have got, have been built in real life. And that's something that we shouldn't forget.
Because intellectual property and research and development are things that need explaining. They're not. For a business person to actually have a conversation about intellectual property or research and development is not just going to be a 5-minute chat. No. It's deep inbred in that organization.
I mean, IP is becoming better known, and the UK IPO, the Intellectual Property Office, are doing a pretty good job on more explanation and sort of making it more accessible. But it's still not widely known. If you stop a bloke in the street and say, "Tell me about patents and trademarks," it's going to be a pretty short conversation. And I suppose if I was cynical, I could say, "Well, that kind of suits us." But you're right, because there is a lot of explanation to do. It's not as straightforward as people think. Everyone knows what a trademark is, but actually protecting that in the right way and making sure you've got the right coverage and in the right countries and all that sort of stuff is not as easy as it might look. Patents, of course, have the added complexity of the technical side. You've got to understand how it works. You've got to understand why it's different to previous stuff, and explain that in a written document, which takes some work. So you're right. There is quite a lot of explaining to do, and given that people's knowledge of that subject is generally quite low, you have to be able to explain that in a fairly approachable and sort of accessible sort of way.
Does everybody have IP? Does everybody have research and development, do you think? There's an opportunity for it?
Does everybody have IP is a different question to does everybody have R&D?
Okay.
So IP, like I say, is the umbrella term. So there are all sorts of ways of describing it, but IP is kind of the result of creative thought, right? So if it comes out of here and you don't want somebody to copy it, that's kind of intellectual property.
Okay.
And IP could be your personal name. It could be Success CXP. It could be anything. So most businesses, all businesses probably, have IP in the sense that they are known as something. They have a name, they have a logo, they have a trading style. So yes, pretty much every business that you come across has some form of IP. R&D applies more to the manufacturing or to the technical businesses who are inventing, making, refining stuff.
Okay.
But the blunt answer is yes. I mean, in some ways, that's one of the reasons why the job is interesting. Because whoever I meet, wherever that might be, potentially has some sort of IP issue that they probably don't know about. And the number of businesses that trade without protecting their trading style or their main company name or their logo or whatever it might be is astonishing.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely astonishing.
Could you put a number on it? Difficult.
With any accuracy, no, but probably 2/3.
Oh, wow.
I would think. Yeah, comfortably.
That's huge, isn't it?
Yeah, it's enormous. Yeah, and there's lots of reasons for that. And the main reason for that is nothing to do with lack of knowledge or cost. It's just that they've been trading quite happily for X years and nothing's gone wrong. Lucky them. If it does go wrong, you really want to have the protection in place to sort it out. So in some ways, it's trademarks in particular, protecting your brand, protecting your logo, whatever it might be. You can see that as something of an insurance policy. Get it done, get it protected, and if something goes wrong, and if somebody else starts using something that's too close to what you're doing, you've got a very good chance of sorting that out. If you haven't done anything, and you're relying on the fact that you've been trading for a few years and some people might recognize you, you might get away with that, but it's a lot more difficult and it's a lot more expensive, massively more expensive to do.
And riskier.
And risky, yeah, that's right. So there is some education to be done there. A lot of people don't really understand what they've got and what they should be doing with it. That's another interesting facet of the job, is going into a new client meeting or a pitch or whatever it might be, or just meeting somebody out of the blue, and learning about what they do, perhaps going back to the office, doing some homework on it, identifying what they've got, what they haven't got, what they probably ought to be doing, and then thinking, okay, had an interesting chat the other day. How do we follow up on that? What do we say? How do we say it? How do we make what we're going to do for them attractive and all that sort of thing? So there's a bit of experience that comes into that. Just bolt up someone and say, hello, can we do your patents and trademarks, please? Because you tend to get a pretty short answer. Lawyers selling to you is never a great thing.
So if viewers and listeners out there today were really interested in learning more, what do they do? How do they access you guys?
Well, they can find us on the web.
Okay.
The firm is Forresters. Our web address is forresters-ip.com. My details are on there. My colleagues' details are on there. All the contact details are there. There's a fair bit of information, general information that is, on the UK IPO website. That's the patent office, for want of a better phrase. There's lots of basic information there on the different sorts of IP, why you might want to protect it, the risks of getting it wrong, all these sorts of things. But we're a pretty open firm. We don't charge for initial consultations. If someone's got an interesting idea they want to come and chat to us about, we're happy to do that, and we don't send a bill for that initial chat. It's as interesting for us as it is for them. So,
You're on LinkedIn?
Yes, yeah, I am. All of us are personally, and as is the firm, and we post fairly regularly. So we've got a good marketing team behind us.
So there's not really any excuse for people not to find you guys?
Not if they want to. No,
Sure.
No, that's right. Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything, Matt, I'd maybe like to ask a couple of questions, but
sure.
maybe in a personal guise, I always like to find out what the downtime looks like for you. What are your what are you interested in?
Lots of things, really. I'm a big fan of motorsport, so I'm lucky enough to have some motorsport clients too. Some fairly well-known race teams and some drivers, some in F1, which is quite nice to have. So I spend time getting deafened at racetracks now and again. I like watching sports. This is how I got to know you guys, through Lawrence at Moseley Rugby. And just kind of chilling out and winding down as much as I can.
Because it's important, right?
It is, yeah. I mean, people are built different ways. Some people find it hard to switch off. I find it very easy to switch off, frankly. Literally, I'll turn off my work phone and that's it. I'm done. I'm not one of those people. Probably shouldn't say this on camera, but I'm not one of these people that checks emails at 10 o'clock at night.
Sure. It's not healthy.
Maybe I'm maybe I'm lucky in that I don't have to. Maybe my clients are just that way.
Okay.
If so, lucky me. But you need to switch off, and if you're away on a holiday, you definitely need to switch off. And I do encourage the people over whom I have any influence at all at the office, which is the people sort of who are sort of in my team, if you like, to be brave enough to do that, to switch off and to just rely on your colleagues to look after the stuff, because they will, and they'll return the favour. It's important. If you don't switch off, you're kidding yourself that you're just making your life easy for yourself by checking stuff each day. You're not actually. You're just always on the go. So if you can and you're brave enough to turn the thing off and leave it at home, do that.
I know we talked before, we're not going to go deep dive in this, but I know that there's some new stuff out there in the marketplace, some things that are brand new, and I know that some people out there will be interested. I really don't want you to go into deep dive, but I know that we said earlier that, things like NFTs, for example, and my guess is that there's no better place to go right now than to at least have a preliminary conversation with somebody like you.
So NFTs and sort of, virtual worlds and metaverse and all that sort of stuff, me having just turned 50, it's not exactly my bag, but I know a bit about it.
Sure.
It's a strange new world. It really is, literally, in fact. It doesn't exist, is the blunt thing. It's not really there. But nonetheless, people are looking to protect brands and other things in this virtual world. And to the extent where brand owners now, certainly the luxury brand owners, cars, watches, clothing, this sort of thing, are protecting their trademarks in a particular category so that they can stop other people using that name in these virtual worlds. And this is the bit that slightly blows my mind, but if I was 30 years younger, it wouldn't. People spend real money, like actual money, on virtual stuff. So people will spend whatever, pounds on a particular outfit to wear in the metaverse. It doesn't exist, but they've bought it, and that to me is a very strange
concept.
Very strange concept, but it's there and it's real.
Yep.
And if you have a brand with a particular profile, you don't want copies of that brand knocking around in this virtual world, so you need to protect it. Yep. So it's once you get your head around it, you can sort of see where the brands are coming from, but it is a slightly peculiar concept at first sight. And
the conversations I've been having is that this is going to absolutely explode, and it's going to.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
There's a number of, I won't say who the company is, but there's a long running advertising campaign on the radio at the moment, all about the metaverse, which I hear about every 5 minutes, and it drives you absolutely bananas. But it's here. It's coming, and certainly Mark Zuckerberg thinks it's coming because he's plowing billions of dollars into it.
Yes, it is.
So I think that's probably right. I mean, maybe it will sort of blur into, virtual meeting spaces. That I can sort of slightly understand a bit more. You can sit in a virtual meeting room. I get that.
Yeah. There's a bit of presence
because it's a bit better than just staring at a screen like the Muppet Show.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to expand into all sorts of things. And just like if you said to me 25 years ago, what do you think about the internet? I'd have probably given you a slightly blank look. I think if we go forward 20 years, it'll be unrecognisable.
Yeah. So Matt Shaw from Forresters, thank you ever so much for coming in today.
Thank you.
Fascinating insight into what it is that you do and your business. Until next time.